This is the story of ex-Chicago gangster slash kingpin, King Larry Hoover. Born on November 30th, 1950 in Jackson, Mississippi. Larry Hoover is widely known as an ex-Chicago gangster slash kingpin who is the founder of one of the biggest street gangs in the United States, the Gangster Disciples. But as for the story of King Larry Hoover, it starts off in Chicago, Illinois, where he was raised. According to reports, not much is known about Larry Hoover's childhood, but it is said he was born in Jackson, Mississippi, and at the age of 4 in 1954, him and his parents would relocate to Chicago, Illinois. It is said as the years went by with Larry now living in Chicago, once he reached the age of 13, he would drop out of junior high school, where he would go on to join a gang known as the Supreme Gangsters in 1963, where he would eventually become the gang's leader some years later. According to reports, in 1969, with Larry now being the leader of the Supreme Gangsters, him and a man named King David Barksdale, who was the leader of a rival street gang known as the Black Disciples, would call a truce with each other where they would go on to combine both of their respected gangs to form a gang together that would go on to become known as the Black Gangster Disciples. According to reports, 4 years later on February 26, 1973, after Larry and David Barksdale decided to combine both of their gangs to form the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, Larry would experience a life-changing moment when a 19-year-old drug dealer named William Young was kidnapped and then murdered in an alley near 68th Street and Union Avenue in the Inglewood neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. According to authorities, they believe Larry was the one who ordered the kidnapping and murder of William Young after William's name was bought up out of 3 people for stealing money and drugs from his gang. It is said a month later on March 16, 1963, after the murder of William, Larry and a man named Andrew Howard, who was a suspected killer of William, would be picked up by authorities on murder charges, where they both will be convicted of William's murder, which led to both men being sentenced to life in prison plus 200 years. It is said once Larry was sentenced to life in prison plus 200 years, he would be sent to Stateville Correctional Facility in Crest Hill, Illinois to serve his time. According to reports, a year later in 1974, with Larry now serving a life sentence, he would take over as the leader of the Black Gangster Disciples, where he deemed himself the chairman when co-founder David Barksdale died from kidney failure, which was a result of a gunshot wound he suffered in 1970. According to reports, in 1978, while Larry was incarcerated and now the chairman of the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, he was still in control of the gang's illicit drug trade in prison and on the streets, which started on Chicago's west side to later extending throughout the United States. It is also said around this time, while Larry was serving his life sentence, he will form the Folk Nation, which he added all gangs to the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, such as the Lady, Satan, Maniac Latin, Spanish Disciples, the Tutu Boys, 260ers, Simon City Royals, Northside Insane Popes, Spanish Cobras, Imperial Gangsters, Harrison Gents, La Raza Nation, and the Latin Eagles. According to reports, in 1989, 11 years later after Larry formed the Folks Nation, Larry's gang, the Black Gangster Disciples, would begin having leadership problems when the Black Gangster Disciples noticed Larry's leadership of the Folk Nation Alliance distorted once Larry began to focus more on the Black Gangster Disciples. It is said with Larry now focusing more on the Gangster Disciples, it will lead to the Black Gangster Disciple Nation falling apart, which led to the Gangster Disciples and the Black Disciples separating from each other, which would eventually lead to a war starting between the two gangs over a drug dispute in the Inglewood neighborhood. According to reports, with the war going on between the GDs and the BDs on the streets, by early 1993, Larry would claim to have renounced his violent criminal past and shifted his attention to becoming an urban political celebrity in Chicago, where Larry would change the GD and Gangster Disciples to growth and development. To help encourage the kids in America from entering the gang life he once followed and helped form. This is part 1 of the Larry Hoover story. Part 2 coming soon.